All right, and welcome back. It's still Rapidon. Hope you had a great time on sports with Ival and, of course, Eastern Circle with Adeze and Michael. This morning, I did promise you a conversation, and it's something regarding climate change and, of course, climate actions. If you've been monitoring the atmosphere, you discover that there's been a change in the pattern. And for some persons, they've complained about warmer temperatures over time and changing weather patterns. And of course, which has gone ahead to disrupt the balance, the usual balance of nature. We hear fire outbreaks in different parts of the world. We begin to hear storms, eruption here and there. But I think in Nigeria, we're a little bit blessed, even though the heat wave this year was it's really, really crazy. I would say was, because I think I want to believe that we've gone past that. But sometime in 2020, it was assumed that that was the hottest, like the hottest. But I think 2025 is going to take the record for the hottest, one of the hottest years on record. And of course, we experience higher temperatures, increased heat-related illnesses, and that makes it difficult for a lot of people to work. I can tell you for a fact that I also experienced it. But then beyond just the temperature, there are other things that climate change, the varying atmosphere, weather can disrupt a whole lot of things, not just human activity, but also production, talking about food and the rest. And so this morning, we're going to be discussing climate change and, of course, its implication. And I do have a guest who's joining us virtually to have this conversation regarding to climate change. And my guest this morning is no other person but a public analyst and, of course, public policy analyst. He is one man who is very experienced, Daniel Oladoja. He has more than 6 years of experience in the field of communications and environmental sustainability. A seasoned strategic communications expert and, of course, campaigner. He focuses on developing local narratives and spearheading media debates to accelerate green innovation and climate smart development. If you're here, good morning, Mr. Daniel.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. So great to join us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So one of the things I did not mention regarding to our guest is the fact that he has a bachelor's degree in agricultural science, that is agronomy, if you want to put it that way. And of course, he is a Mandela Washington Fellow and a certificate in public policy analysis from the London School of Economics and Political Science. So he's vast in a lot of things. But I wonder why he decided to choose conversations relating to climate change, which I'm not saying is a bad idea. But Mr. Daniel, if you're still there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, of all the things that you're decorated with, why did you choose climate change conversations?
Well, there's a story to it.
Let,
Some part of it is serendipity, right? I tell people that climate change chose me. I didn't choose it. And how I got into climate change was I've always been in it, even when I was doing my agricultural science degree. My research focused on alternative herbicides that are non toxic to the environment. When I did my master's research, it was a similar theme. But yeah, I usually tell people if there's a story I want to tell, it's back to 2005. I think I was in secondary school. I was writing WIAC at the time, and it was hot at the time. 2005 was the hottest year on record at that time. And it kind of just made me realize that the world is changing and we need to do something about it. And I think that was where it started from for me. And that's where the story all goes back to that time, that moment when it was impossible to leave school very early until very late in the evenings because it was crazily hot. And it just kind of spurred that passion that look, the world is changing, the earth is changing, and someone needs to do something about it. I didn't decide outrightly at that time that I was going to do anything related to environment or climate change. I think it took about eight years or so after that time before I could, maybe more than that. I think like 12 or 13 years more than that, beyond that time before it all came together. And so for me, it's kind of like it was something that was more serendipitous than a deliberate effort. Like, okay, I'm going to do climate change. No, I think I just realized that everything I have done converged at one point, and it was climate change in the middle. And that's been it. So I usually would not, I'm not like those who would say, I've always cared about the environment, even though everything I have done in my research and academic life had been towards alternative development, that protects the environment. I did not deliberately decide that I wanted to be an environmental communicator or public policy analyst in climate change and energy.
Mm.
I think it just kind of like happened that I found myself in a role that combined everything together. And that was the moment I said, oh, okay, I think this is the place to be. And this
Okay.
is what all everything has led to
Okay.
from the past. Yeah.
Okay. So let's now dive into the conversation properly. Um, I mean, it's basic knowledge. We've talked about what climate change is several times. Everybody talk about climate change, try to describe climate change, and in different parts of the world, it comes in different ways. I think in Nigeria, we are so blessed to not experience some severe nature, of the change. But one of the things we have to know that the effects of climate change, of course, we have increased droughts, we have warming, rising ocean, we have loss of species and all of that. But I think let's now come back to Nigeria. What really affects Nigeria is not enough food and, of course, more health risks, poverty, and displacement, which are the three things that I would want us to dwell on in this conversation this morning. So, as a climate change person, I mean, you've been at the forefront of many of it. What do you think we are right now when it comes to not enough food, which is an effect of climate change? Because I mean, right now, we don't have enough food to feed the people.
Thank you so much for putting it that way. I think that the effect of climate change in Nigeria is not talked about enough because you, and to be honest with you, there's a difference between weather and climate.
Yes.
Nigeria has a good weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have, a very nice weather. It's friendly, sunny, jolly, and all of that. But our climate is increasingly becoming hostile.
Mm.
Climate is what is a record of average weather over 35 years, right?
Mm.
Your weather is the year on year. Your climate is measured every 35 years, right?
Mm.
So yes, the weather is friendly, but the climate is becoming hostile. And when the climate flips, it kind of changes the year on year measures of your weather. So um, heat waves have become like a regular thing now. It's more like every year you have a weak heat wave. And what do you do? Like, to be honest with you, every year since 2005 has been a record breaker for world average temperature. And there's a report that suggests that Nigeria is going to be one of the hottest places in the world by 2050,
Mm.
right?
Wow.
So, but I'm trying to say that we need to flip that narrative that we have a good weather. The weather is becoming gradually hostile. The
Mm-hmm.
sun is becoming unbearable. You live in Abuja. I was in Abuja a couple of weeks ago, and in Abuja, when it's hot, the air around you is also hot. And
Yes.
that's what makes it unbearable. I live in Lagos, right? In Lagos, if you escape the sun hitting you, there's a cool breeze because of the sea breeze and the land breeze,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Lagos, all you need to do is stay outside of the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for every other place in the country that doesn't have that coastal blessing, or you're close to the river, when it hits you in the sun, or when it's sunny and it hits you, you have to rather, you can't even, escaping the sun itself is not alone, is not enough. The breeze, the wind around you is hot,
Mm.
right? And that is becoming increasingly frequent, right? And so I'm just trying to say first that look, the nice weather that we all talk about is becoming hostile. So we need to start telling ourselves the truth. Our weather is no longer nice, it's now hostile. Food production, it's the same issue. Everything is connected to the degree of hotness or coldness of the earth. When it's hotter, there'll be increased activities of microorganisms that cause pests and diseases, right? The bad insects that love to eat everything you produce, they like it hot.
Mm.
The pathogens that create the plant diseases, they love it hot. Heat is a blessing for them. They produce more. It's called fecundity. They just increase in rapid succession when it is hotter. And that is why you need your fridge. And that is why nothing gets damaged in your fridge because your fridge is very cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the hotter planet makes it a better place for microorganisms to thrive. And that is why we're having increased plant diseases and reduced harvests. Another thing you need to understand is that increased temperature is bad for post harvest. So if you have your mangoes, it's mango season, right?
Yes.
Everybody wants to sell their mango in Lagos or Abuja. You're coming from Makodi. Usually you could travel from Makodi to Abuja over a 12-hour period, and your mango is fine. You still get it to Abuja fresh and all of that. But because of the increased temperature, these things have to travel in the open and the sun is hot and all of that, the air is hot. By the time the mangoes get to Abuja, half is destroyed. So
Mm-hmm.
we would say, oh, there is no food. 40% as at January, the data we have is that 40% of 40 million tons of food that Nigeria produces get destroyed. No, am I? No. I think it's about 40%. Yeah. And that 40% can feed 40 million people, right? So, and we are not catching up fast enough with cooling systems. Why? Because we are very, very behind on electrification. Now we're thinking about solar cooling systems and all of that. These things are not coming on stream as fast as we need them to. So, increased temperature is destroying food on the farm, is destroying food post harvest, right? And that is what is leading to the shortage. And now, where it even gets more sticky is displacement. So, the people in the Chad region, the people in the Sahel and the Sahara belts are gradually getting displaced. The herders are living in search of greener pastures and all of that. Now there is increased competition in the food production belts. So before in Nigeria, you used to have the livestock production belts and the food production belts. Now people in the livestock production belts, because of climate change, no longer have access to vegetation and all of that. Now
Mm.
they are moving gradually into the food production belt, and that is causing clashes.
Yeah.
It's causing farmer and herders clashes. Now farmers can no longer stay on their farm. So you have three problems. The farmers are no longer staying on their farms to farm. The little that you're producing is getting destroyed by pests and diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not the least, even the ones you get off the farm, if you don't get them out to the market as fast as you can, would get destroyed because of extreme heat. So you
Mm.
see how one factor is just kind of having a multiplier effect across every other thing.
All right. So now this is a serious problem that we do have on our hand, which of course we had to narrow it down to the three, which is food, poverty. But then you haven't spoken about the health aspect, which will come to the health aspect, because let's finish on food because food is very very important. If you don't have food to eat, I'm sorry, you will even get not even healthy. And then if you're displaced as a person, which of course leads to other security problems. For example, the farmer headers clashes, which of course we have termed a security problem right now because people are not safe. We're having clashes here and there. Oh, this one is being killed by this one, and it's almost like, oh, what is happening? If these guys had enough area where they are coming from to feed, I'm not sure they would encroach into the food producing areas. But these are issues. So let's talk about the health aspects now, because uh, at what point does this climate effect in terms of health? At what point does it get to the people? Is it from the movement from one place to the another, or it's the microorganisms you mentioned? How does the health risk come about?
Well, the simple starting point is the heat waves, right? I Last year during the heat waves. Now the heat waves have become like there's a calendar for it.
Mm.
It starts around December. becomes increasingly unbearable from January
Yes.
up until the start of the rains, right? And during that window last year, in Adamawa State, for instance, there were 20 cases of mortality. People that died that they could record that died from extreme heat. 20. But it was more than that. There were lots of mother and child, a lot of other cases. But at least the numbers they could count from direct, reaction and all of that was about 20 people. 20 people is a lot. If if there's a clash somewhere between maybe terrorist groups and all of that, and they say 20 people die, everybody would be sad. But we have 20 people, 20 recorded cases in Adamawa State just from heat waves alone. And that is actually where it starts, right? The fact that when heat becomes unbearable, it kind of like worsens every existing conditions that you have before. And what then happens is there is also the pathogenesis of most diseases, right? Take, for instance, everyone is talked about cholera, and it could be, I mean, these are things that happen because of extreme heat as well. Because um, if microorganisms become more active and all of that, they get into the water, they get into all of that. Mosquitoes, for instance, like it hot. I'm sure you know that they really love it hot. If your room is cold at 16 degrees, mosquitoes will go and hide and leave you alone.
True.
But the moment it becomes hot, they come out and start singing hallelujah to you. So there is increased activities of mosquitoes, right? And that would mean increase in the incidence of malaria.
Yes.
So all these things are kind of interconnected. The microbes that cause plant diseases and human diseases love a hotter world. They love a hotter world. That is the beginning. So whatever microbial disease that we have that are environmental microbes, in any incidents where the world becomes hotter, those microbes are going to be happier and they will do more damage, right? And we're already seeing it. We're seeing it with increased activities of, increased incidence of malaria. Thank God there's a vaccine now. We hope it helps. But and then the most dangerous thing with heat waves and heat actually is not the disease they can cause, is what they make worse, right? There are pre-existing conditions that people have that demands that they are stabilized at certain conditions, right? But once those conditions are not there, especially in the case of Adamawa State, it wasn't the heat waves that killed the people. It was the fact that there were pre-existing conditions that could not be managed because of the heat waves, right? So let's not even think about, what kind of diseases will climb. No, it is that existing conditions in human life would become worse at those unbearable temperatures.
Okay.
And the last one that people don't even talk about is the mental health, right? Because every time we talk about health, mental health is the one we mentioned last. When it's hot and you're in your Uber, you're driving to work, or in your bus, you're cranky. You become a very, very nasty person, right? You get to work and your brain is not functional because you're stressed out. So these are all the ramifications of this thing. We're gradually seeing a lot of mother and child mortality. And, unfortunately, with the way things are, it is the women and young children that bears the brunt of everything from malnutrition to whatever it is. And they are the ones who are also most affected by the impact of climate change. Adults would always find their way, but women who are pregnant, women who have children, and the young ones, they are the ones who bear the brunt of it, and they are the ones who are most affected by this crisis.
Absolutely. I do remember earlier in the year when the whole heat wave was on, Nimet was always putting out statements, oh, don't wear this color don't wear black. I mean, I couldn't even dare wear black like this because you cannot tell how the atmosphere was going to be. The warnings were everywhere. Drink water, which makes me to want to ask, there are some communities who don't even have access to good water. And so you're experiencing this heat wave, and then you're being told to drink water, you're being told to stay under a shade, you're being told to do this and do that, but you don't even have access to some of these things that they're telling you to do to keep yourself safe from the effect of the heat waves. Which that brings me to the next part, which is solution. Do you think, I mean, what I want to say, this is my favorite question because it's solution based. Do you think that Nigeria as a country is really preparing itself enough for the change in the climate, in the environment? Do you think we are even thinking about it? Do you think that we're even preparing enough? Because every year it's the same thing and it's like a rush approach to things.
Are we prepared? That's a very interesting question. I think that we're gradually beginning to realize that the world on beneath our feet is moving, right? That the ground beneath our feet is moving, and awareness and connection is important. You cannot help people adapt to what they don't understand. Remember that in Nigeria, when it's hot, the first thing people say is God, I beg, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it's the rain is too much, the first thing we say is God, I
God,
beg,
I beg.
right? So a population where everything is seen as an act of God cannot adapt,
Hmm.
and that's the problem. It's the starting point. The reason why the adaptation is slow is because people don't even understand that this is a scientific problem or a political problem or an economic problem. We're still seeing it as an act of God. The reason why it's sunny is because we are sinners. The reason why the rain is too much is because we have sinned. So we beg God for forgiveness and all of that. Those things are standing in the way of our adaptation. So we continue hoping that next year will be better. Or okay, when the heat waves leave, everyone is like, thank God, the weather is now better. It was just about those last 4 months were really unbearable.
Hmm.
How until people begin to understand that, look, that that change is because it's over now. It doesn't mean it's over completely. It's going next. I think we would get to that point where people now understand the cycle, right? Because it's new, everyone will be eventually understand the cycle. And maybe when we understand the cycle, we will then begin to find a way to think about adapting properly. But for now, a lot of people still think that it's an act of God. It's because of, whatever sin we've committed and all of that. And that is what is slowing our adaptation, because you cannot adapt to what you blame God for. But as soon as we're able to take away that mental block, and politicians, business people, normal everyday people now understand that this is a natural problem that we have to create solutions to, then we can begin to think. But we are not even close to being ready. Number one thing I want to say is look at our power generation, our power situation. You in a hotter world, you cannot in a hotter world be talking about power failure,
Hmm.
right? In a hotter world, the first thing you need in a hotter world is steady power, because the cost of cooling is going to 10x whatever it is now, right? Your AC, I'm sure for those who drive around, or even if you use Uber or you use buses or all of that, you could remember what was happening during the heat waves.
Mm-hmm.
Your ACs were running 24/7. You get into your car, your AC is on the highest. You get into a bus, you want the driver to pull down all the blinds. That's number one, right?
Sometimes it
So
wasn't even
number two
working.
is how are we living? And sometimes it wasn't
It
even
wasn't
working. It
working.
wasn't even enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? Abuja is a beautiful city because everywhere you have boulevards, right? And that kind of like helps you manage the impact because you have a lot of green. But how many cities are like that,
Mm.
right? How many cities have sidewalks where people could take long walks, and there are boulevards, there are shade trees? How many offices have green areas where people could sit when it's hot? How many have we inculcated? What are we doing with our architectural design, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we designing houses with bigger windows? We need more air to come inside the houses. These are some of the solutions that are not too expensive, right? In the outer arid regions, are we working on actively planting trees to help to like break the heat and all of that? These are small, small, significant. They look like small, but they are significant. They
Mm-mm.
are not, because natural solutions are the cheapest, right? We may not have the resources that Dubai have to install ACs, outdoors and all of that. Those are like extreme solutions.
Yeah.
But for us, it starts with natural solutions, right? It starts with how we build, how we move around, um, how we live, the kind of the way we eat as well, how we use electricity as well. These are some of the simple solutions that can help us mitigate these things. We need to plant more trees. We need to plant, I mean, short-term solution, significantly plant more trees, right? We need to create sidewalks. We need to create parks for people to be able to sit down and rest, right? We need to have cooling spots, right? We need to have cooling spots where people can get water to hydrate. And then we need a lot of awareness. We need a lot of awareness. Yes, NIMET will tell you don't wear this, don't wear that. But we need to, now the heat wave is, I think, has gone down.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time to begin to sensitize people. Unfortunately, it is actually from one problem to another one. The heat wave has stopped, the rain has started, so now we're talking about floods.
Floods,
And we're
yes.
saying people should be ready, flood. So there seems to be no rest
But
of mind.
but Daniel,
So
let me pause you. Let me pause you there. You say we're talking about flood. People need to be careful. But this is where my question comes in. Do we have to wait for another rainy season to start telling people to be careful, or we ought to have been making? I mean, we use the dry season to create solution for the rainy season, and then we use the rainy season to create solutions for the hot season, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. Uh, so the thing we need to, I completely agree with you that we need to do these things that you've said. We need to actually be able to prepare people before time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to wait for the crisis before we start preparing for it. And how we do that is that you don't wait for the hot season before you talk to people about preparing for heat waves. You don't need to wait for the floods before you talk to people about dealing with floods. And that work is squarely on the shoulders of the civil society, the government, and the media, right?
Mm.
The heat waves are past, but we're talking about it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I but and that is brilliant. It's brilliant in the sense that we're talking about what people experienced, right? But we have to continue this conversation all through the year. Even if the flood is there, let's talk about the heat waves and the flood, right? Because they are related.
Mm.
So we shouldn't do things seasonally. I understand um, I understand early warning systems and seasonal variations, but we should not always wait until it's in season. We should design an educational system that helps to orient people across the year because these things are not temporary changes, they are permanent changes, right? So we need to continue educating people, not just in those seasons, but just all through the year. We have to continue talking about these things. That's the way it becomes like ingrained in the mind of people, and then each person can begin to think about it. It's the way when you travel abroad, everybody, when it's winter, everybody knows what to do. When it's fall, you know what to do. When it's summer, you know what to do,
Mm.
right? These things are, that's the same way we need to do it. We need to, because heat waves are new for us.
Yeah.
Maybe for people in Maiduguri and Sokoto who are used to extreme heat, they might be used to it. But for the generality of the country, it's new. So we would need to continue intensive education so that people get it and then they understand the patterns and then they can react to it.
Okay. All right. So, like you stated, it is very, very new to us, and so the level of heat wave we experienced this year, maybe uh, by next year or by the end of this year, when it's another hot time, it might just be more than our imagination. But now, I did mention three effects from the about five effects that we have of climate change. Do you think that there's any tendency for Nigeria to experience the other effect? Talking about a warming, rising ocean, increased droughts, and severe storms. Do you think that Nigeria is likely going to experience some of these other effects of climate change? Or should we just say, okay, well, we are immune to this and we're going to leave that for other countries, other parts of the world to experience?
No, there's a report that Lagos is probably going to be sinking in 50 years or thereabouts.
Do you really believe that report?
So I believe it with the whole of my heart.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to tell you a story. So I lived beside the Atlantic Ocean. I lived 5 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean for a period of more than 2 years. Like I could walk from my house to the Atlantic Ocean, and I would do that every day. And I could tell you that in those 2 years, the portion of land that went underwater, right? The portion of land that went underwater was about the size of a 4-lane express road. And I am not exaggerating, right? Like, I mean, an 8-lane, like if you have 8 lanes of express, that was the size of land that I saw go underwater. Communities along the coast in Lagos right now are battling to save their lives because the water is taking the land away at an alarming rate. The reason why a lot of people are not talking about it is because many of us are not in those neighborhoods. But for those in those neighborhoods, it is no longer funny. And if something significant is not done, right, a huge part of this city is going to be underwater in a couple of years, right? It's actually happening already.
So this is very concerning because I think that was sometime last week. I did read about it. I did even mention it. I think that was last week or 2 weeks back. I did mention it on the show. But then now that you've brought it up, it is very, very alarming because by 2050, Lagos will not exist, and we do not want to have a full place like Lagos not existing. I mean, our commercial city, you want to play with our commercial city. So let's now look at what do you think can be done to avert this type of situation? Because I do not want to wake up one day and they tell me, oh, I used to know Lagos. It's no longer there anymore. It's just like saying this house you used to see every day on the street is no longer there anymore. We wouldn't want that. So what can we do? I mean, Lagos State is big. And so for it to go underwater, then we need to look at solutions immediately.
Yeah, and that is why Lagos is ranked #1 in terms of climate action because they are like they are the most affected. Yes, they may not have a drought and all of that, but they are the most at risk because in terms of sea level rise, Lagos is like is in the top 3 in the world.
Yes.
It's top 3 in the world for sea level rise. And that is why we cannot act like we don't know what's going on. So what can we do? What can we do is we need to act, and a lot of that solution is just beyond what people can do. For instance, along the coast of Lagos, there are very few coconut trees. You know, the natural thing for beaches is that you have coconut trees.
Yes.
All those coconut trees are gone. I saw more than 10 get swept underwater. Somebody has to do something about them, right? We have to find ways to push back, to slow down nature a little bit. Also, the way we build. And one of the issues along the coast is sand mining. And that's also a problem. The communities themselves are taking sand from the beaches to go and build houses. And so they are making it easy. So they are making the work faster. The sea is like, I want to kill all of you. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll make it easier for you, right? So those are some of the steps. And we need massive education, right? We need to think about how we build. Structural barriers have to be created. When you go to places like Thailand, you see the kind of reinforcement, because Thailand is also at risk. And you see the kind and the barriers they are putting along their coast. Someone has to think about that as well, because we cannot just fold our hands and say, oh, let nature have its way. If we allow nature to have its way, it will kill all of us, right? So those are some of the simple steps we can take. Let's invest in reclamation. Let's let's invest, and then we need to be careful with sand mining along the coasts. We also need to be careful with how much of dredging is done. We also need to be careful with how much of reclamation is done along that stretch. We also need to invest significantly in reforestation of the beaches, the coconuts that are traditional to the beaches. We need to find a way to bring them back so that we can have vegetation that would maybe hold the soil, and slow down the water and all of that. And education is important. We need to educate and educate and educate and educate people. The haphazard development along the coast needs to be checked. The way people just build anyhow, we need to check all those things. And these are some of the things I think we can do, because the real problem is not cost here. The real problem is cost in the global north. So it's the melting of the sea ice, it's the melting of the polar ice that is leading to the increase in sea level. So there's also need for concerted effort to push back against the global north and say, look, what you're doing is creating significant problems for us down south. And that is why everyone must be a climate advocate at this point.
All right. Just before we go, it just reminded me when you mentioned the ice and all of that. I just remember the movie where Inedo was asked what should be done to the ice, and she said we should bring the ice down to Nigeria because we need the ice to cool our drinks. And so it was it was really really funny because I mean that would mean more disaster if that has to happen. But thank you so much, Mr. Daniel, for having this conversation with us. It has really been a great time talking about climate action, climate change, its implication, and possible solution. Thanks for granting us your time. I always like to give my guests a high five when they come on the show, but you're far away from me, so I'll just give you a virtual high five.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Do have yourself a pleasant day ahead.
Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
All right. So that is Mr. Daniel Ladoja Bright, and talking to us about climate change. I hope that you're able to get a lot of things. As humans, we play a huge role in preserving our environment. And I do hope that the government will do all that is necessary to save us the next phase that we are moving into, or that which we are already in right about now. And that's the size of our package this beautiful morning. We'll go on a very short break. When I come back, Rapid Don't be coming to a close.
Time is power. Our lives